Hey, thanks for checking out my channel. I'm Tom Neiman, and today I'm excited to bring you a bit of information that's just unbelievably helpful. And that is this wonderful book called The Artist's Guide to Sketching by James Gurney and Thomas Kinkade. That's right, James Gurney and Thomas Kinkade. Thomas Kinkade is also known as the Master of Light. Now, James Gurney is one of my favorite artists. He still is living. He's a master painter, a master draftsman, and perhaps maybe more importantly for folks like us that are looking to advance in their creative endeavors, he is a master explainer. Now, that's not me attributing that to him. That's what other people say about him. And James Gurney himself has admitted he doesn't do workshops or teach, but he does enjoy explaining. And you could definitely see that in his videos that he posts on YouTube and elsewhere. And you could definitely see evidence of that and feel that with the soulful way that the explanations come through in this book. James Gurney and Thomas Kinkade poured their hearts and souls into the information within this book. And if you take a peek at it with me, you'll understand what I mean. So come along with me. We'll sit down at the desk. We'll leaf through this book. I'll highlight some of my favorite quotes and favorite ideas from the book. And we'll point out some details with regards to the structure of the book and the main ideas that are trying to be put forth by Gurney and Kinkade. Okay, so here you have it. We're at the desk and we're going to review The Artist's Guide to Sketching by James Gurney and Thomas Kinkade. This is the expanded and remastered edition. They refer to themselves in this book as the classic book about making art on location. And that's really what this is all about. This book is about ways with which you can navigate the world as an artist and actually document what you see by drawing, painting, more specifically sketching on site through direct observation, which was one of my favorite things to do as a creative. If I have free time and everybody else is occupied with their own stuff and I'm given the opportunity to do what it is that I want to do creatively, I'm going to head out into the field and I'm going to sketch, most likely out in the woods somewhere or along some body of water. In this case, this book addresses the practice of sketching through direct observation on site more generally, and it is just chock filled with wonderful examples, all of which are examples of work that has been done either by James Gurney or Thomas Kinkade over the years, and or like in this case, by both of them, where they teamed up to complete this little illustration or sketch in charcoal and fine point marker. So this original book was actually published, I believe, in the early 80s and written in the late 70s and early 80s by Thomas Kinkade and James Gurney. And they have an interesting relationship, which historically I feel like can't be overstated. They were friends in art school and they dropped out and decided to travel the country by train, and they documented the scenery through the artwork that they created on site. And they took those experiences plus other lessons that they had to share when it comes to the practice of sketching on a regular basis and incorporated into this book. I don't know if you're like me, but there are times when I'll read a book and I'll appreciate its contents and I'll have a good time reading that book, whether it's an art book or some other topic. But there are other times where the book will resonate so much that I get the feeling that the artist or the author really poured their soul into the work that they created. And I feel like that's the case with this book. So obviously it was re-released, revamped recently. I'm not sure. I haven't seen an original copy of the initial edition, but in this edition, they go through a nice brief explanation of how they wrote this book on sketching, and they offer a nice introduction. And then there's 10 chapters Chapter 1, the experience of sketching, and a whole bunch of subtopics there, which are really, really helpful. Chapter 2, materials. Chapter 3, achieving accuracy. Chapter 4, capturing motion. So a lot of thoughts on gestural sketching there. Chapter 5, creating mood. And then chapter 6, using imagination, which is wonderful. Actually, one of the strengths of these artists that are the authors of this book for sure. They can render very literally a scene with extreme accuracy, but also at the same time, on a whim, incorporate mystical elements or cartoon characters or imaginary creatures at will. Pretty amazing. Studying nature in chapter 7, sketching people, chapter 8, chapter 9, exploring the man-made world. So, they actually go through sketching in the home and architectural sketching and other ideas that are really helpful. Chapter 10, sketching in your life, keeping specialized sketchbooks, developing sketches into paintings. So much really helpful information in under 170 or 80 pages or so, including the bibliography and index. So once again, this story is just amazing how these two good friends developed as artists, young adults, exploring the world through direct observation, incorporating that into their art practice, ultimately becoming full-time artists at a young age and very, very successful in their own right. But this book is magical. Just the sheer volume of great works, illustrating how they incorporated sketching regularly into their daily practice, the way things are explained, not only within the core parts of the book, but also within the illustrations and examples of their artwork, where you can review their handwritten notes that explain their thought process and their observations while they were creating it. Like, for example, this little train car, where they actually, within the notes at the bottom of the sketch, include some really, really helpful thoughts about the circumstances that they were creating within. And it's just beautifully, beautifully done. You'll see a lot of examples as we go. Now, in the introduction, we go through their initial rationale for creating the book and why it is helpful for artists to sketch on a regular basis. Right at the beginning here, you can see in this passage, they write, when you think of sketching, what comes to mind? You might think of loose, quick, unfinished drawings done on location for pure enjoyment. Well, you are totally right, almost. Sketches are quick, and they use techniques that are more direct and spontaneous than the kind of work that is done in studio. And certainly, you're right when you think that sketching should be enjoyable. And then they go on to say, well, then why do we say almost? Well, if you're like most people, you may not be fully aware of how much more is possible while sketching. And that is the beginning of the journey that they take us through within this book. So they go on to also kind of unpack the reasons that artists oftentimes will fall victim to a mindset that'll prevent them from leveraging sketching on a regular basis to build out their skill sets and grow as artists. Here you could say, and yet almost every artist deep down wants to do more sketching. The reason that not everyone does has nothing to do with motivation or discipline. In fact, the very reason many of us don't get around to sketching is that we consider it a kind of obligation, something that artists have always done through the generations, a mandatory habit for the profession, but no one ever tells us why sketching is so important or how it should function in our creative lives. Take a handful of old 19th century masters, let's say Da Vinci, Rembrandt, Bruegel, Dürer, Van Gogh, or Van Gogh, as some people say, and Degas. Everyone knows that they all were avid sketchers, but consider how central their sketching was to the work. Almost invariably, the sketchbooks cover a far broader range of subject matter than the final paintings do. Many of the original seeds of ideas for great masterpieces are found there. In general, we feel in old master sketches a free play of fancy and absolutely honest technique, a keen discernment, a key discerning eye observing the world, and most of all, we feel a lively, joyful, exuberant spirit in their sketches, which in turn enriches everything else they created. For these masters, sketching served as a vehicle through which they made contact with the real world. So there's a lot more discussed here, but as you can see, it's extraordinarily well written. And I would once again, describe it as soulful. Here, they just do a ridiculously good job of sharing their insights in how a sketchbook can actually transfer into incredible growth as an artist. And in addition to that, better, higher quality, and more impactful final works of art. And then you could see sketches from both James Gurney and Thomas Kinkade. Here's a silhouetted sketch, very simplified value sketch of this horse, which is pulling a carriage. When we go through each of these chapters, they give you ideas about different materials that you can use. They reinforce the notion that there really are no rules. And you can make good use of inexpensive materials for sketching. You can use a loose leaf notebook. You could use a spiral bound notebook. You could use all kinds of paper, illustration board, whatever it is that you have at your disposal in order to incorporate sketching into your daily life and your art practice. And I think that's really, really valuable. We oftentimes will lose sight of that when we think about how we're, especially those of us that are kind of in the realm of painting, oftentimes we get lost, kind of looking for that next high quality paint or paintbrush. And fact of the matter is, if we spent more time in our sketchbooks, it would probably move us further along than if the time that's spent looking through the reviews on different paint brands or different pastel brands. If we just spent more time sketching, we more likely would find ourselves being much more successful when we're behind the easel or out in the field trying to actually paint a finished painting if we were more effective with our drawing and sketching ability. All right, so they go through a whole inventory of ways with which you can incorporate different materials, different art supplies, from markers to paints to ink, of a couple different examples. They kind of show you how they set up in the field as younger artists when they were traveling around the country, on the spot setup. They talk about how they kind of organize their backpacks and everything else that you would need if you were somebody who's never done field-based sketching before, or if even if you're an experienced sketcher, there's ideas that you can pull from the work here and the information that's provided within this great book. They go through some of the ideas that you can use to achieve accuracy. I would say this is very, very helpful. They talk about when it's important to use an underdrawing and how much underdrawing is necessary. They talk about perspective and the different ways that you can take measurements to make sure that if you're interested in doing so. And they take us through just a complete step-by-step process here that is something that is really, really invaluable, practical ideas for making sure that perspective is rendered in a way that will help develop a good drawing. I teach some workshops from time to time, and actually this is an issue that a lot of folks will ask questions about. And Gurney addresses this, I assume this is his writing here, in a way that really, really simplifies it. He says, many artists are intimidated by the idea of perspective when it comes to sketching, but there's really no reason to be. The method that we use on the spot is really very simple. It doesn't involve rulers or T squares or triangles, and you don't even have to worry about vanishing points or complex construction lines, because if you take the time to set up guidelines the way that they do here, um, you can be confident that all the lines in your subject are in proper perspective. And he goes on to explain that. And it's really kind of like an extraordinarily practical explanation, which you can kind of get the idea of here just by looking at some of these diagrams and drawings. You start by actually measuring certain key points within a scene. For example, the little notches on the green tower here, the start of the roof on the green tower, the edge of the roof line. And then you go through the process of actually connecting uh, these different aspects at the if, or sight measuring it with whatever your drawing instrument is. Here you could see he's holding his pencil at the same angle as this roof line, and then following through all the key lines with that same process will help you capture the right perspective without any sort of complicated method of doing that. And the end result is a beautiful, accurate drawing like this one. All pen and ink. Capturing motion is a wonderful chapter because he dives into, or I should say, they dive into familiar scenes that we oftentimes are really interested in capturing, but we struggle with. Paintings of our pets and other animals from direct observation, paintings of seascapes where we have waves crashing into rocks, and people, people in motion. And they give really good examples of settings within which you can work on capturing motion, and also tools that you can use in order to improve training your memory, getting it down fast, the scribble approach. Really good ideas here. Here's a quick quote: every artist has his own favorite method for actually translating the remembered image, for getting it down fast, but most methods will fall into one of four categories, which we call the scribble approach, the gestural approach, the mannequin approach, and the tonal mass approach. These are all discussed here. Try them all to see which suits your personality best. And that's just a golden example of how well they explain things and break them down very simply and easily in the effort to help us understand and hopefully have more success incorporating these ideas into our own art practice and our own growth as an artist. Creating mood, just a wonderful chapter. So much that we can incorporate, ideas that will actually, we can come back to and review this book. This could be a great coffee table book that you just, or something that you keep on a bookshelf within reach within your studio, or perhaps maybe on a side table at your bedside. And I've reviewed this book several times now, and there are things that I'll forget that I'll come back to and go, "Oh my gosh, yeah, that's a great idea, and I should be doing that more, or I should try that method." And once again, the sketches and the explanations that come along with them. For example, some of the ideas and thumbnails that were used here to create this beautiful, moody image of a network of highway overpasses is just incredible, or freeway overpasses, rather. This final sketch here is 11 by 7. Took a little time to get to the right design. Using imagination, here's an example of an incredibly clever tree sketch, along with, a garden, looks like a sprinkler, the illusion of a lot of detail, which is probably rendered pretty quickly. This one was actually created by James Gurney, called the Tree Stump Creature. We have another James Gurney sketch here, which obviously is, kind of out of this world, like this pretty regularly. Here you have Thomas Kinkade, where he actually exaggerated the length of the ears. They talk about exaggeration. Another Thomas Kinkade sketch here. This is in calligraphy pen on sketch paper. And, really just a fantastic kind of imaginary scene here. Some creatures created by James Gurney. Studying nature. So this really resonated with me because, my primary practice, like I mentioned a lot, is plein air painting. I mean, I enjoy all kinds of creative things, but that's where, if I had my choice, that's where I would spend most of my time, out on the hiking trail or on the beach or what have you, painting scenes. And this speaks to that. This chapter, they talk through how nature is your personal drawing workshop. If you don't have the money or the time or the ability to travel to a workshop where you have a more experienced artist sharing ideas with you about how you could advance within your art practice, nature can do that for you as long as you approach it with a curiosity mindset and you spend time slowing down and observing. And it can be really, really good for your nervous system. It can be really, really good for your psyche and your soul at the same time. Plants, almost an endless supply of inspiration, and they go through the number of ways with which you can get really, really good at painting plants through direct observation. Here's a quick diagram of how they simplified the shapes associated with this palm tree and how they used a silhouette approach to simplify this complex drawing so they could render a drawing more accurately that successfully creates that translation to the viewer that you know exactly what you're looking at. And they do that also with this tree as well. You can see they kind of create this analogy of it being shaped like an umbrella, and how you can increase your chances of success by turning your attention away from details and focusing on shapes. You'll hear a lot of artists that teach and explain, a lot of YouTube artists that provide helpful information will also describe how it's really important to start by looking at the general shapes. Same goes for other objects too, like clouds. Just about anything that we paint or draw, it's a great way to approach it initially. Here's an example of some thumbnail sketches, and then this beautiful sketch here, super simple. This one, it's called Twilight in Golden Canyon, pencil and white gouache on brown paper by James Gurney. And just does a beautiful job of creating mood with a really, really simple approach. Goes through clouds, rocks, and landforms. The benefits of studying nature, goes into a little bit more detail here. This is gouache on illustration board. You could just see his level of mastery with gouache. Just exceptional. So again, if you get a chance to check out any of his videos, I would encourage you to do so. Sketching people. This is Country Preacher pencil on smooth paper, 11 inches by 14 inches by Thomas Kinkade. And here's a really good example. I mean, this man was an exceptional artist. He's since passed away. I don't know if you don't know the story, you could just Google it or search for it online. Just a fantastic story of a life really well lived as an artist. And if I have the wherewithal to do so, I'll do a quick summary of his biography that I'm currently working on reading right now as well. But he was an exceptional artist, as is James Gurney. You could see his ability to render anatomy and form and shape, and also convey emotion, was just really, really strong. Exploring the man-made world. Look at this, grain silos. This was done with calligraphy pens and gray markers and charcoal on sketch paper. This is done by Thomas Kinkade. And this is a scene in Buffalo or near Buffalo, New York. They describe the process by which they selected this scene. This section here, thinking as a documentary artist and the joy of exploration, just phenomenal, phenomenal insights into the importance of sketching and incorporating it as a regular practice within your life as an artist. Study of a shirt. Most of us have shirts. So if we run out of materials or ideas or inspiration, we can always find it. Plants around us, shirts, interiors, our imagination, the opportunities abound. By creating sketching games. So, for example, they this is actually quite funny. They say the next time you're at a restaurant with friends, draw an unusual head from your imagination. Pass the sketchbook to the person next to you and say, "Would you mind giving this person a body?" More often than not, you will arouse the imagination of your friends who will eagerly continue the sketch. Following the daring example you set, creativity will build as the sketch is passed around, and soon you will have a number of interesting, humorous sketches to serve as your memory of the evening. And there's a couple of other examples here. I'm going to try that one. That sounds like fun. Might be met with some resistance, I think, depending upon the crowd you're running with, but looks like it could be a lot of fun. And then they sum up where they actually kind of review, their hopes that this will actually build momentum within the creative folks that are actually reading this book. There's a nice bibliography and an index so you could refer back to ideas. And then one last final sketch of these boots. So I would absolutely recommend that you acquire a copy of this book. You can get one used. I'm not sure about the old version. I paid for a new version of the updated copy that I showed you here today. Cost just under $25, and it exceeded all of my expectations, which were quite high. I have